Chrysler ME Four-Twelve. In 2004, Chrysler walked into the Detroit Auto Show with something nobody was expecting. This is the company that made the PT Cruiser, remember? Minivans, Sebrings. Not exactly hypercar territory, but somehow they rolled out this thing called the ME Four-Twelve, and it had a quad-turbo V12 with 850 horsepower and a claimed top speed of 248 miles per hour. And the crazy part is that it wasn't fake. This car actually worked. Prototypes drove around. Journalists sat in it. Chrysler was reportedly targeting a price of around $600,000, which would have been an absolute steal compared to what Bugatti was charging for the Veyron. So what happened? Well, this was during the Daimler-Chrysler era, when Mercedes and Chrysler were technically the same company, but really weren't getting along. Many believe Mercedes wasn't thrilled about the idea of their American cousin building a car that could embarrass AMG. Turning this working prototype into a mass production car would have cost Chrysler hundreds of millions in crash testing and manufacturing fees, money the company simply didn't have while their mainstream models were struggling. The project got shelved. No press release, no goodbye, nothing. It faded out before the paint dried on the prototypes. Every couple of years, someone posts photos of this car online and the comments are always the same. People are still mad about it, and honestly, they should be. They killed the wrong car. Honda NSX V10. The original NSX is one of the most respected supercars ever made. It was reliable, it was fast, and it basically forced Ferrari to step up their game. So when Honda stopped making it in 2005, the obvious question was what comes next. For a few years, the answer looked amazing. Honda was working on a naturally aspirated V10 successor to the NSX. There was a concept called the ASCC that gave people a preview. According to reports from the time, the engine revved past 9,000 RPM, and the car felt closer to a race car than anything Honda had ever built. Then the 2008 financial crisis hit, and Honda basically shut down anything that wasn't essential. The V10 NSX got cancelled, the F1 program got cancelled, and a lot of really cool projects died in a matter of months. But Honda didn't throw away the blueprints entirely. They stripped down the project and secretly turned it into the HSV010 GT race car just for the track. When the NSX name eventually came back in 2016, it was a completely different car. Hybrid, twin-turbo V6, all-wheel drive. Good car, honestly, but not the one people had been waiting for. BMW M8 E31 prototype. In the late 1980s, BMW was quietly working on something they never officially announced. The 8 Series had just launched as a big, comfortable Grand Tourer, but a small group of engineers inside M Division wanted to build a version of it that could actually take on Ferrari. So they did. They called it the M8. It was based on the E31 8 Series. The body was reworked to be more aggressive, with wider arches and cleaner aerodynamics. A lot of the steel was replaced with lightweight materials to bring the weight down, and in the middle of it all sat a heavily reworked version of BMW's 6.0-liter V12, naturally aspirated, tuned to produce around 640 horsepower. In the early 1990s, that number put it right in the conversation with the fastest cars on the planet, but the timing could not have been worse. The early 90s recession was hitting hard, luxury car sales were collapsing, and BMW's leadership decided the 8 Series should stay a refined GT rather than a Ferrari fighter. Building a limited run M8 didn't line up with where the market was going, and the numbers just didn't add up. So the project was killed before anyone outside BMW knew it existed. BMW hid the prototype away for over 20 years. It sat in a private storage room until BMW finally revealed it publicly in 2010, decades after it had any chance of being built. Ford Shelby GR-1. The Shelby GR-1 is one of those concept cars that made people stop mid-sentence when they saw it. Ford unveiled it in 2005 as a tribute to the 1964 Shelby Daytona Coupe, which is already one of the most beautiful cars ever built. But the GR-1 was covered in polished aluminum, not painted. Actual bare aluminum buffed to a mirror finish. It looked like liquid mercury in the shape of a car. Underneath was a massive 6.4-liter V12, making 605 horsepower sent to the rear wheels. It had the classic long hood, short deck shape, and everyone who saw it wanted one. Carroll Shelby was reportedly a big supporter of the project internally. People were literally sending letters to Ford asking when they could buy it. Ford never gave a real answer. They had just launched the Ford GT and didn't want to spend money on a second Halo car, so the GR1 was set aside without much fanfare. No big announcement, no explanation, just a slow fade from the conversation. The weird twist is that a small company called Superformance eventually got the rights to build a version of it, and they sold every one they made. So there was clearly a market. Ford just didn't want to be the ones selling to it, which is a pretty Ford thing to do, honestly. Lamborghini Egoista. Lamborghini turns 50 in 2013 and decides to celebrate by making the most ridiculous car they've ever built. It's called the Egoista, which is Italian for selfish, and it has exactly one seat. Not because they ran out of room. On purpose. There is no passenger seat. There's no place to put your friend. It's just you and the car and the road. The design was inspired by military aircraft. The cockpit lifts open like a fighter jet canopy. The interior has instruments styled after aircraft cockpits. And underneath all of that is a 5.2-liter V10, but honestly, the engine feels like an afterthought. Lamborghini called it a gift from Lamborghini to Lamborghini, which is a very Lamborghini way of saying they built this thing for themselves and nobody else. They made exactly one, and it was never even registered for the road. You can go see it at the Lamborghini Museum in Italy. It sits behind glass, spotless, completely unused. The most selfish car in history ended up belonging to nobody. Peugeot Onyx. Peugeot is not the first name that comes to mind when you think of supercars. They make hatchbacks, they make family cars, but in 2012 they showed up at the Paris Motor Show with something called the Onyx, and it caught everyone off guard. The body panels were made of raw copper sheet metal, not copper paint, actual copper. When it was new, it glowed with this warm, brilliant bronze color. But copper reacts with air and moisture, so over time, the body would age and develop a unique patina. Some would darken, some would turn green, and some would develop weird spots. No two cars would ever look the same after a few years. Underneath it all sat a roaring 3.7-liter V8 diesel hybrid engine taken directly from their Le Mans race car. But honestly, the whole car felt more like a piece of fine art than a machine. It got awards. It got attention. It became one of the absolute stars of the Paris show. But building a $1 million copper supercar didn't line up with Peugeot's actual business, and the leadership never had the courage to push it through. The car got put away, and Peugeot went back to selling reasonable cars to reasonable people, which was probably the smart business move, but it was still the wrong one. Maserati Birdcage 75th. The name Birdcage goes back to the 1950s. The original Maserati Birdcage race cars got their nickname from the crazy tube chassis underneath their bodywork, which looked like the wires of a birdcage. Those cars were beautiful, fast, and important in racing history. So when Pininfarina wanted to celebrate their 75th anniversary in 2005, they brought the name back. What they built barely looked like a car. It was based on a Maserati MC12, which itself was based on a Ferrari Enzo, so there was a V12 buried in there somewhere, but you couldn't really tell from looking at it. There were no doors. The entire glass canopy tilted forward to let you in. The body was almost seamless, with no visible panel lines anywhere. The seats didn't even adjust. It looked like a car from 50 years in the future. The reaction was so strong that many collectors wished it could become a production car. But this was never supposed to be one. It was a one-off, a design exercise, a celebration. Turning it into a real car would have meant compromising everything that made it interesting. Only one exists. It sits in a collection somewhere, still perfect, still untouched, waiting for a world that finally deserves it, I guess. Nissan BladeGlider. The Nissan BladeGlider is one of the weirdest looking cars ever made, and I mean that as a compliment. The front wheels are almost touching each other, and the rear is super wide, so the whole thing looks like an arrowhead or a paper airplane. It looks wrong until you understand what it's doing. The design was inspired by the Delta Wing race car, which showed up at Le Mans in 2012 and confused everyone before proving that narrow front, wide rear cars can actually work really well. Nissan took that idea and turned it into a fully electric road car concept. And then in 2016, they went a step further and actually built 2 working prototypes with help from Williams Advanced Engineering, the same Williams that builds Formula 1 cars. And here's the thing. It wasn't just a weird design that looked cool in photos. It was quick, it was sharp, it was genuinely fun. The narrow front made it turn like nothing else on the road, and each rear wheel had its own motor, so it could rotate through corners in ways normal cars just can't. Nissan hinted at production. People believed it was coming. And then nothing. The whole project faded out without a real conclusion. The prototype still exists somewhere. The technology still works. The idea was never proven wrong. It was just ignored. Citroën GT, the last one on this list, has the weirdest origin story of any car I've ever heard of. In 2008, the creator of the Gran Turismo video game series asked several car companies to design fantasy cars that would only exist inside the game. Most of them sent digital files and moved on with their lives. Citroën took it way more seriously. Their design team built the car so carefully that when it showed up in Gran Turismo 5, players loved it immediately. And then Citroën did something nobody expected. They built a real one. A full-size, fully functional concept car showed up at the 2008 Paris Motor Show. The first full-scale concept used a Ford-derived V8, while later demonstration versions appeared with electric drivetrains. It looked like nothing else in the building. Long, low, wide, and kind of predatory. For a company known mostly for practical French hatchbacks, this was a complete curveball. There were reports that Citroën briefly considered building a small run of them at around 2 million euros each. Wealthy buyers reached out. Media coverage was massive. Then reality caught up. The costs were too high, the market was too small, and the car had nothing to do with anything Citroën actually sold, so it went back to being what it started as. A video game car that snuck into the real world for one afternoon and then returned to the screen it came from. If you could save just one from the vault, which would it be? Hit subscribe and let me know.